Okay, so first up today is, and if we go to the next slide, I'll see the title here. This is an outbrief from yesterday's presentations and discussions, and this will be given by Parvathy Prem, who did just a fantastic job yesterday with session moderating. Hope we can do as well today. Parvathy, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, take it away.
All right, thanks so much, Brad. So yes, well, this is an outbrief from day one. Yesterday's session, I had a fantastic time. I hope everyone else did too. The co-moderators were, the co-chairs were myself. I'm Parvathy Prem at APL. My co-chair was Tom Orlando at Georgia Tech. Ariel Deutsch and Donald Hendricks were our co-moderators for the sessions, and they did an outstanding job documenting a lot of the discussion that we had. So if we go to the next slide, please. All right, so this is just an overview of the things that we talked about yesterday. And as Sarah and Brad mentioned, all of these presentations were recorded and they will be available soon on the website that Sarah just shared a link to. And of course, you can also go to the workshop website and find abstracts for most of these talks. We did have a handful of invited talks as well. And those will be recorded and made available. But we kicked off the day with a series of overview talks. I talked about some of the outstanding science questions. We had Amy Ross give us an update on how spacesuit development is going and what that team is thinking about when it comes to developing suits to operate in the polar environment. We had Amy McAdam give a presentation on some findings from a recent NASA study on what kind of measurements required for ISRU. And we had Danielle Simkes talk to us about something more long-term, what we would do with returned lunar samples once we have them. We had a trio of excellent science talks by Paul Lucy, focusing on the composition and origins of polar volatiles, and then Margaret Landis and Tyler Powell, who were looking at various aspects of the thermal environment. We also had a series of mission updates from the three smallsat teams, Lunar Map, Lunar Flashlight, and Lunar Ice Cube. Deborah Needham gave us an update on the upcoming CLIPS polar delivery that's planned for the next few years. We had Tony Colaprate give an update on the Viper mission. Bethany Ellman talked about Lunar Trailblazer, and we had James Carpenter represent our friends from ESA in talking about the Prospect measurement package. We go to the next slide. The majority of the session yesterday consisted of talks on various techniques of characterizing volatiles in situ. So these were all contributed abstracts for the originally planned in-person workshop, and we got to hear from all of these wonderful people yesterday. So these are the various instruments and measurement concepts that were discussed. I tried to group them here. Up at the top, we have several teams that are working on characterizing exospheric volatiles and various aspects of the space environment. Moving down towards the lunar surface, we have another set of instruments that are focused on characterizing the lunar surface and on characterizing volatiles using various platforms and looking at various wavelengths. Once we have identified volatiles, Gerardo Dominguez and Scott Rafkin gave a set of talks that I separated out here because they focus particularly on how we would characterize those volatiles, whether it's their isotopic composition or using laser absorption spectroscopy to characterize evolved gases there. We also had talks by Tim Livengood and Mr. Vaksoy looking at what neutron spectroscopy and microwave radiometry can do in terms of providing information about the subsurface. I couldn't resist the little corgi there. Gordon Chin gave us a talk about the Corgi Consortium, which is a consortium consisting of 3 instruments that presented, as well as Rockstar, which is sort of a context mapper. So all of those were great talks. And if we go to the next slide. All right, so the presentations were followed by 2 hour-long breakout sessions, similar to the ones we'll have today. This one on characterizing and sampling polar volatiles was led by Tom with support from Ariel. And so Tom and Ariel, you should feel free to chime in maybe in the chat window if I skip anything. I was in the other room, which we'll hear about next. But I think we had 2 very productive discussions. Some of the main outcomes that came out of this first breakout, which was focused on characterization and sampling of polar volatiles. These are some of the important messages. One is that we should measure and preserve multiple volatile species. They can be important in determining the origins of volatiles, and there's also a potential for toxic species or trace minerals that might be interesting for various reasons. There was a recognition that there's value in maintaining the lowest temperatures possible. When it comes to volatiles, temperature can be a proxy for information. Stratigraphy is important. And some of the science driving the delivery, the transport, and sequestration of volatiles isn't completely understood yet. And there are several related questions to that. There was a recognition in this room that nonpolar and also subsurface volatiles are important in their own ways. The contribution of volcanism to the lunar volatile inventory is a question that's been rising to the forefront of many of our minds recently. This group discussed various ways to address those questions. They also touched on aspects of planetary and astronaut protection, whether that's protecting our people from toxic gases and also accounting for the influence, for the impact of exploration on the local space environment and on the science that we're trying to achieve. They also went the extra mile and discussed a potential strategy that might involve first ground truthing orbital measurements, exploring volatiles at depths that many of our orbital remote sensing techniques at the moment are blind to, and then deciding what needs to be cryogenically preserved and what could be returned in the gas phase. Now, if we go to the next slide, in the next room, we were focusing more on various challenges associated with the polar environment, which is a place that we have never visited. And so it has a whole set of new, interesting operation aspects to consider. Temperature is one of the things that make the poles so unique. Temperature varies with both location over very small spatial scales as well as larger spatial scales. It also varies with time. And so this is an interesting operational environment. You can where volatiles show a certain dynamism in how they're transported, and that's something we should keep in mind as a challenge for some of the measurements we want to make. It can also be an opportunity.
1 minute.
Thanks, Brad. We also discussed challenges associated with illumination, low light conditions, the terrain, geotechnical properties. The plasma electrical environment is not something we discussed in a great deal of detail, but that's less because it's not important, but more because it's something that remains to be fully characterized. We also touched on aspects of contamination and potentially hazardous volatiles, and we noted that both precursor missions and long-term planning have important roles to play. And so that is a very quick overview of 2 discussions that we hope to write up and get more information out to all of you about. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much, Parvathy. Fantastic summary. Just one very quick question, if I might ask. Did you get a sense from the discussion yesterday of whether the analysis of volatiles in situ versus sample return or in addition to sample return is a big deal?
So we did have, it seems like there is interesting science that you can do both with return samples and in situ. So, I think people certainly have ideas for both aspects. And so I think they're both compelling things to do, and they both have an important role to play. That was the sense I got from yesterday.
Okay, good. I think we'll have more discussion of that today.